Paris has sent special forces to Cameroon to help find a kidnapped French family. 3 adults and 4 children were taken hostage from a tourist camp on Tuesday before supposedly being transported to neighboring Nigeria. France believes that the Nigerian terrorist group Boko Haram was behind the abduction. Let's cross live now to Ken Stone from Hamilton Coalition to Stop the War for more. Mr. Stone, first the Ivory Coast 2 years ago, then Mali and Algeria, and now Paris has sent troops to Cameroon. Has French involvement in West Africa become a trend?
Yes, I'm afraid so. And the trend is called neocolonialism. It's a part of the old colonial powers reaching back into Africa for its resources where they used to operate a century ago. France was the colonial power in West Africa, and during its many decades there, it literally enslaved the people of West Africa to work in their mines, in their factories, and on their plantations. In fact, slavery was not even abolished in Mali until 1905. However, after World War II, the colonial powers of Africa were kicked out by movements, national liberation movements, which were sometimes supported by the former Soviet Union. However, after the Soviet Union collapsed, and then the U.S. war on terror began, the former neocolonial powers are once again flexing their muscles, and they're starting to reach back into Yugoslavia, into Iraq, into Afghanistan, into Libya, and now into West Africa. If the main product of Mali, for example, were mushrooms, there would be no French troops there, or in Niger. But the main export is uranium, and that's very important to the French, and that's why the French are there, that's why NATO is there, that's why, unfortunately, Canada is there as well. And I think the main point is that this is, unfortunately, a trend. And like the 19th century, race for colonies, we have a 21st century race for colonies beginning. It's a tragic fact.
What is really happening in West Africa? I mean, with militants active in Algeria, Mali, Nigeria, and Cameroon, what's going on there?
Well, it's a complicated situation. Many of the national boundaries that were drawn by the colonial powers have no bearing at all on the location of the indigenous nations of Africa. And so people are divided along different sides of boundaries. Most people don't even recognize many of the boundaries in the Saharan region and the sub-Saharan region. There is a further problem that the West has introduced in its successful overthrow of the Gaddafi government. It introduced Al-Qaeda type terrorists into Africa where there weren't them, where they didn't exist in any significance before. So that has created a can of worms. The main point, though, is that the Western powers of Europe, the neocolonial powers, and the United States, NATO, these countries have no right to act as the police of the world. In the 19th century race for colonies, they said that they had the white man's burden to carry on their shoulders to civilize the people of Africa. In the 21st century, they call it humanitarian intervention to protect the people's human rights. But those are both frauds. And the Western countries really have absolutely no say in what goes on in West Africa. They should have no say.
So what are the chances the special forces deployment in Cameroon could escalate into a full operation like in Mali?
It could, but it's not likely because the French have, ever since their colonial rule ended, had a policy of force de frappe, which is a striking force, an expeditionary force, a special force where they go in and they deal with a certain immediate problem and then they leave. They do not have the stomach to maintain an occupation for a long period of time. So it's the problem for them, the neo-colonial powers like France, is that the so-called rebels or jihadists or whoever it may be merely has to melt into the desert or into the bush and wait out the expeditionary force, and then when the expeditionary force leaves, they come right back in. And the problem, there's no permanent fix for this.
Ken Stone from Hamilton Coalition to Stop the War, thank you very much for your thoughts on this.